I think innovation proceeds well in a good regulatory framework. At the end of the day, for innovation to succeed and land in the market with good results, you need trust and you need safety. You need things to work well as they are intended. So those are significant issues, and cutting corners with them is not helpful to anyone in the long run. In fact, it poisons the well for more responsible innovators.
Hi, I'm Jhalak, and welcome to the CCG Tech Podcast. Welcome to the CCG Tech Podcast. Today we're joined by Mr. Amandeep Gill, Under Secretary at the United Nations Office for Digital and Emerging Technologies. Welcome to our podcast, sir.
Thank you, Jalak. Thank you for having me.
So, if you could tell us a little bit about, your journey to this role and the experiences you've had, and how that shapes how you're able to approach the difficult task at hand you have currently.
So, my role today as Under Secretary General for Digital and Emerging Technologies and Special Envoy on this issue is to support the Secretary General and the senior leadership of the United Nations in assessing technology trends, assessing their implications for our work at the UN, and supporting member states and other stakeholders as they come together in what we call digital cooperation to address these shared policy challenges. And my upbringing, professional upbringing as an engineer, comes in handy. So I take an interest in technology that goes beyond my current job. So that's always helpful. I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to technology. And then I worked for many years as a diplomat, looking at strategic technologies, the contestation around them, the cooperation around them. So that kind of prepares me well for this particular role. I had the privilege of supporting the current Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, when he set up the high level panel on digital cooperation back in 2018. So, since the first days of his mandate in 2017, he's been focused laser like on taking the world, taking the UN to the next level on technology policy cooperation. And it's my privilege to support him on that vision.
And then more recently, you've served in the role of the UN Secretary General's envoy on technology, and the related high-level advisory body that was set up, the Global Digital Compact process that has been ongoing, and now you're leading United Nations Office for Digital and Emerging Technologies, and really shepherding the establishment and implementation of the GDC via things like the International Scientific Panel on AI, the Global Dialogue on AI Governance. Can you talk our listeners through what the significance of these processes are and what all of this entails?
Right. I think your listeners would probably look at the UN as this kind of, one entity, whereas at the UN, the Secretariat is just one of the principal organs of the UN. So there is the General Assembly, the member states, they come together. They have the lead. They are the sovereigns whom we serve as the Secretariat. So there are some processes that are Secretariat led, some of these reflections that you mentioned, the high level advisory body on AI. But then there are others that are led and steered by member states. You mentioned the Global Digital Compact, which was negotiated by and adopted by member states at the Summit of the Future last year in September. And that's a path breaking document. For the first time in the history of the United Nations, it sets out some modalities, some mechanisms for the governance of AI. And these decisions were supported by the analysis of the high level advisory body on AI, There was 39 experts, multi-stakeholder experts, who looked at the challenges but also the risks and the opportunities stemming from AI, and came up with a set of 7 recommendations. And two of those recommendations are what you referred to, and they were adopted in the Global Digital Compact, endorsed. That is the scientific panel, the International Independent Scientific Panel on AI, and a global dialogue on AI governance within the United Nations. So, why these two are so important? I think as a fast moving technology, AI is reshaping our world. So we need independent scientific assessments of its direction, its impact, both in terms of opportunities and risks, so that policymakers do not operate in the dark and they can take the right decisions informed by scientific evidence. This panel hopefully would be set up before too long. The negotiations are in their final stages and would provide us regular assessments of the technology itself, a little bit like what the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change does. The second foundational piece is this dialogue, the twin sister of the scientific panel, in a sense, where governments can come together, but also stakeholders who are shaping governance from their work, the perspective of their work in the private sector, civil society, or academia, and can regularly learn from each other and can build shared understanding of what it takes to govern these technology. And the United Nations is the right place for it. One, because it's inclusive. Two, because we have a shared bedrock of norms, human rights, sustainable development, commitments related to gender and the environment. And our work on AI governance doesn't have to start from scratch, it can rest on that bedrock. It's also, I would say, a third important reason for this to happen here and in this manner is to build interoperability. There is a risk of fragmentation of governance of AI and of data, and the UN can reduce these frictions coming from fragmentation and allow the private sector and other players to kind of operate with more confidence and interoperability across the world. So that's the significance of what has happened through the Global Digital Compact, informed by the work of the High Level Advisory Body on AI. In a sense, from last year's decision, we will soon move into an implementation phase. So it's been 1 year, nearly 1 year of hard work on taking those decisions into the implementation phase. And I'm very hopeful that next month in September, when the leaders come together at the UN, it'll be a significant opportunity, a significant milestone in terms of moving from decisions to action.
So you've described the International Scientific Panel on AI as really a body whose task will to be to demystify the state of AI currently. What are scientifically proven challenges and opportunities? Um, could you talk a little bit about what is the understanding when we say a scientific panel? Is it science in the sense of hard sciences? Or is it really something that takes into account the very socio-technical nature of technology like AI?
Right. So definitely the latter. So it's a multidisciplinary perspective. AI is not only mathematics and computer science and computer engineering, but it's also ethics. It is also law, because there are these implications. It's also economics. So many disciplines are involved. And I can point you back to our experience with the High Level Advisory Body on AI, these 39 global experts coming from all 5 regions of the world as we understand them at the UN, coming not only from governments but also private sector, academia, civil society. And most importantly, not all of them with a computer science AI technical background. So I think this is the kind of scientific understanding we need. It's a systems type of an approach. It's a multidisciplinary approach, and I think that's the best way to handle the challenges and the opportunities of AI.
And the global dialogue on AI governance is going to be really complementary. It's a twin sister to this process. Will this have a policy setting role? How do you see this playing out?
So the negotiations are in their final stages. So I will not try and interpret what the member states are still to decide. I think the way the high level advisory body on AI described it was in terms of the policy dimension, that governments and other stakeholders need to take some decisions in terms of how they respond to AI developments. Whether it is let's say, we need to govern data in a certain manner or protect intellectual property in a certain manner. So I think it's important that this dialogue stays close to that notion of policy relevance. Whether it comes up with kind of anything binding, I think that's not the intention at this stage. So it is, as I said, shared understandings, common vocabulary, and mutual learning. Hopefully, this will help uh, build the right contextual appreciation, the right understanding for nations and regions to take their own legally binding steps. And then for companies and others to kind of operationalize these understandings in their own working, the self-regulation aspect of it. So what I mean, in other terms, is these three levels of governance: the global governance, the national regional governance, and the industry layer. They need to work in harmony, in a good relationship with each other. And who knows, at some stage, people may, the technology may evolve in a way, and we take all the best possible actions, and a lot of the implementation of governance moves to the third layer. But if it does not, it could be that the governance response is concentrated at the national layer, backed by law, backed by executive orders in some cases, etc. And it could even be that if the technology evolves in the direction of greater risk or opportunity that is highly lopsided, then you may need more robust action at the international level. But for now, we need to kind of preserve these connections, put the foundational pieces in motion, and then be agile and be more like the tech itself, which is moving in unpredictable ways. We don't know. I mean, we are at an early stages of a complete rewrite of this field. So who knows? I mean, today everyone is excited about large language models. Tomorrow it could be something else. So we need to be agile in our governance response as well.
You talked about three layers. You've talked about the multilateral layer, you've talked about a national layer, you've talked about a self regulation, industry led layer. There's been a lot of conversation in the last few years and a lot of work that's been happening around AI standards development. And there's increasing focus on how do you embed human rights and associated values within the development of these standards. Would you say that's a fourth layer, or would you say that that comes within the layer of self-regulation and industry-led initiatives?
I would see it as part of the third layer. So standard is where things become routinized. They are taken into account almost as a reflex. The work that's going on today in ISO IEC, in ITU, in IEEE, in Sense and in the European Union and other places, it speaks to that. There is a very significant set of analysis points in the report of the high level advisory body on AI standards. And it is partly reflected in the decisions of the Global Digital Compact, which calls for an AI, the work on standards to be taken forward. And the AI standards exchange, for instance, is one of those ideas. The ITU, IEEE, ISO-IEC are taking that forward. In fact, in December in Seoul, there'll be an AI standards summit where we can see, get more visibility into the AI standards work that's happening around the world. We can also catalyze this shift that you mentioned, the socio-technical dimension, because so far standards in this space have been very technical, but AI is a different beast. So how do we integrate these aspects, sociological, anthropological aspects into the that standards work, human rights, ethics, etc. I think this is work that's ongoing. So we need to build a new community of practice. We also need to build capacity around the world to develop and implement standards. The standard setting work today is heavily dominated by countries in the global north, companies in the global north. So, how can it be made more representative of today's world? I think that's an ongoing challenge. I see the standards work as crucial, and as a way to also kind of build interoperability and retain connections across different regions as it has happened in the past, but it needs a new direction on which we are embarking.
If we look at the experience of the last couple of decades with regulation of the internet, especially social media platforms, there was a push towards self regulation by the industry. And there was a sense that regulation would stifle innovation. But then we've also seen more, over the last decade, that there have been significant harms that have emerged. And there have been limitations uh, towards relying on just self regulation by companies. What would you how would you think about this sort of dichotomy that gets presented between regulation and innovation?
It's a false dichotomy. I think innovation proceeds well in a good regulatory framework. At the end of the day, for innovation to succeed and land in the market with good results, you need trust and you need safety. You need things to work well as they are intended. So those are significant issues, and cutting corners with them is not helpful to anyone in the long run. In fact, it poisons the well for more responsible innovators. So I'll call this out as a false dichotomy. It's an artificial distinction that is often advanced to look for a no holds barred, no guardrails kind of an approach to innovation. Look, this is a very powerful technology. It's not nuclear weapons, but it can rewrite our social code. It can rewrite power relationships. It can lead to tremendous impact on labor markets, for example. And we cannot just wait for these externalities to manifest themselves at large scale and then take action. So we need not only agile governance, but we also need a little bit of anticipatory governance. And I think what I would say is that you cannot just have the third layer. You need those two other layers. So they are all indispensable. The global governance layer, the national regulatory environment, particularly where it concerns safety. Imagine children. We put those. You mentioned the social media example, but even smartphones, we put them in the hands of children. These were tools designed for adults, and I dare say, there are some harms that we haven't completely anticipated or understood, even in terms of school performance, sleep, health impact, and so on. So I don't think we should be making the same mistake that we made with social media or with smartphone use with children. So that is to be avoided. And we should also not repeat the mistake of looking at governance as regulation alone. Governance is about creating trust, is about inclusion, it's about diversity in terms of participation in something that is beneficial. So you could have a very well regulated market where there are only a few players who dominate this space. Is that good in terms of public good or not? That is sometimes debatable. So I think this broader notion of governance is also important to keep in mind as we look at AI.
The IGF recently happened in Norway in June. We had the WSIS Plus 20 review that happened in Geneva in July. And there was a lot of conversation among civil society and academics to avoid duplication and multiplicity of forums discussing the governance of, various technologies, of the internet, digital cooperation. So, given this, how does the implementation of the GDC, whether it's in the form of the International Scientific Panel on AI or the Global Dialogue on AI, complement these existing forums and processes?
Right, absolutely. That's a legitimate question. And for your listeners, the IGF is the Internet Governance Forum, set up 20 years ago. It's the 20th anniversary. And WSIS is the World Summit on Information Society that took place in Tunis in 2005. In fact, the review is ongoing, and the high level review will happen in New York in December. And the meetings that you mentioned were meetings of stakeholders, discussions around this issue. So, look, when the GDC was being negotiated, the negotiators were very conscious of the need to avoid duplication, to create, fresh structures or mechanisms where, such mechanisms already exist. But you cannot duplicate something that doesn't exist. So the AI governance mechanisms don't exist today. They are being created in response to a new challenge. When the World Summit on Information Society happened in Tunis in 2005, you had about a billion people on the internet. Spam was a big issue. You didn't have social media, you didn't have big data, you didn't have AI, you didn't even have some of the kind of malevolent actors that you see today. Misinformation, disinformation, the way in which cybercrime has been spiraling. So, some of those challenges were not there. And the world is a different world today. And the GDC was an attempt to come to grips with today's challenges. So, AI and data on the one hand, but also the need to build an inclusive digital economy. The digital economy and some of its ramparts like digital public infrastructure, they are powerful means for developing countries to leapfrog their current development challenges. So rightfully, the member states place that under focus and come up with new understandings around that. Likewise, digital trust and safety, the human rights aspect, which is very strong in the GDC. Where existing forums exist, for example, the Internet Governance Forum, the GDC acknowledges their role, has very progressive language on what they should be doing and how they can be supported even more. The ongoing work on connectivity, on skills development, etc. So I would simply say that there is strong and clear complementarity between what the GDC brings to the international community and what the long-standing and valuable WSIS outcomes have brought to the international community. And going forward, I think it should be our endeavor to preserve that complementarity, avoid duplication, and move forward to deliver value to stakeholders, preserve the multi-stakeholder approach, which has proven its worth with the IGF, for example, and ensure that, just as current discussions on AI move forward, that approach is also taken forward in AI governance mechanisms.
You mentioned the value of the multi stakeholder approach. There's a lot of concern that despite the fact that a lot of UN processes until now have been strongly premised on the idea of multi stakeholderism, there's a shift that's happening towards more concentrated multilateralism. And that the space for civil society and academic voices to shape these processes and discussions is receding. How would you respond to this criticism? And as we move into the next stage of AI governance, what can be the role of civil society in academia, and how can it be strengthened?
So I would challenge this notion. Um, I don't think multilateralism is strengthening at the cost of multi stakeholder approaches or vice versa. Just like your innovation and regulation dichotomy question, this is a false dichotomy. You see that in ongoing processes, the high level advisory body on AI, which is a multi stakeholder body in composition and in its work, and which in fact, because the challenge often for multi-stakeholder approaches is that those discussions happen, they are valuable discussions, but they don't find a channel into the policy decisions. And with the HLab, it worked, that those multi-stakeholder reflections discussion actually landed in policy decisions. Likewise, if we look at the open source week that has been happening for the last 3 years, the multi-stakeholder space has opened up to a new community, and this is in the UN. So you have hundreds of enthusiasts from that community coming into the UN, working on some of the challenges that we face at the UN. And we had a day which was like a take over, so the community virtually taking over the UN. So within the realm of possibility resources, there is a lot of dynamism on multi-stakeholder approaches. I can give you a third example, which is the digital public infrastructure domain, which was neglected in the past, like the open source community. So, through the work on the DPI Safeguards Initiative, there was a multi-stakeholder group that actually put that thing together, and again a landing point in the GDC, landing point in the implementation that's going forward with UNDP, and now a regular DPI summit where hundreds of practitioners of digital public infrastructure from around the world come together. So they may be from the government, from the private sector, from civil society, academia. They come together and address shared problems. So I think the mistake we make is to look for this kind of false dichotomy, that one is at the cost of the other. The other mistake we make often is to imagine the multi-stakeholder community as only one kind of a community that is found perhaps only in one or two forums. I think if we are true to the vision of multi-stakeholder approaches, multi-stakeholder cooperation, then we should be celebrating the expansion of the multi-stakeholder approach to these new areas. And the last example, since I know you are interested in data, Jhalak, to leave with you is the working group on data governance, which has just recently started its work. And this flows from the GDC. So that working group itself is multi-stakeholder in composition, and it has finalized its terms of reference. So we are bringing these new and fresh approaches to the UN. So I would say, the rumors of the death of multi-stakeholder approaches are false. In fact, multi-stakeholder approaches are well and alive, and we are taking them into new areas.
Over the last sort of decade, there's an increasing recognition about the importance of the role of the global south, whether it's space for global south governments to contribute and shape discussions, or perspectives from global south civil society and academia. And this comes at a time where there is even less resource available to global south academia, civil society to participate in many of these processes. How can this participation be facilitated and strengthened, and how can we ensure that It's more than sort of a checkbox that's happening, but it's truly meaningful engagement.
Right. I hear you. I think this is a lacuna in our current environment. So those with resources, those with travel budgets can, jet to these meetings and participate and make their voice heard. Whether it's the standards work or it is policy reflection, say in the Internet Governance Forum. There are some efforts like at the IJF and also, some of these other forums where, some support, some bursaries are available. And we also have technology, although it pains me to see that often, those who can afford it attend in person, others are online, with the kind of a more limited participation. So, how do we address this challenge going forward? I think at a time when resources for all these forums, regardless of what label you put on them, are going down. I mean, let's face it, we have a very dramatic situation in terms of, budgetary support, even extra budgetary resources. So, how do we ensure that we live up to our ideals? And, it's a challenge. I think part of the answer is also that the global south itself needs to, there are some economies in the global south that have more resources today. They also need to step up and support their own, whether it is philanthropy, private sector, or governments. They need to support their own civil society, NGOs, academia to participate in some of these approaches. And my own experience as a diplomat, I found this very valuable. So you often get inputs that are partial, that are not of that high quality from within, the established channels. So you often, if you reach out and if you join hands with academia, with experts, with private sector, you not only get a better understanding of the context, but also a sharper appreciation of the national interest or the international public interest that's involved. So I think it's a win-win situation, but we have to get people to see it that way.
You mentioned that it's important for domestic philanthropies within global south contexts to step up and support civil society and academia to participate in these processes, share those country and unique perspectives. Very often we've seen in the global south that domestic philanthropies are very rightly more focused on things like children's malnutrition, primary education. And there isn't as much focus on facilitating and supporting work around research and work around governance, whether nationally or at the international level. How do you think civil society and academia within the global south context can make a compelling case to domestic philanthropy around the need and importance of supporting such work?
Through quality work, and I would also add by networking, by coming together with their counterparts from other regions, so that they make a compelling, almost a global case for that work. So whatever is being done nationally or at the community level, is linked to those global trends and partnerships and lesson sharing. So I think there is no substitute for that. Quality work, high quality work, and high quality partnerships, those two. And, to whatever extent we can from the UN, we will continue to support that, with those kind of, criteria, diversity, high quality work, partnerships. And I must say, although, when the negotiations are still to conclude, but frankly, the vision that the HLAB, the High Level Advisory Body on AI, sketched out for the scientific panel was that this should not be an ivory tower looking at these developments, but it should be networked with academic centers of excellence, with experts from around the world. So there is strength in numbers. There is less risk in diversity, and more eyes on anything that's being put together. Whether it's code or good policy analysis is always helpful.
Talking about the role of the global south, um, we've had a series of summits, AI summits, starting with Bletchley Park, followed by the summit in Seoul, and more recently, earlier this year, the Paris AI Action Summit. Next year, we have India hosting the AI Impact Summit. What do you think is really, what would you hope that can be achieved through these series of summits? And what is the relevance of these summits given the ongoing UN processes around AI?
Right. So first, I want to say, we are very grateful to the summit hosts for putting leaders level attention on this issue by hosting these summits and inviting others. The Secretary General has been to each one of the three summits that have been hosted, so he's quite grateful for the opportunity. And the UN has worked closely with the summit hosts, all the three summit hosts so far, and we're working with India as the next host to ensure this complementarity between what are the aspirations, what's the vision of the summit hosts and the gathering countries, and what's being done at the global level. This complementarity was recognized explicitly for example, in the February Paris AI Summit declaration, the importance of the Global Digital Compact. Many members of the high level advisory body on AI, in fact, 1/3 of the membership was at the Bletchley Park Summit, Seoul, so they have been participating in these processes in their own capacity. So I see this complementarity and how these summits can help, and particularly the forthcoming AI Impact Summit in India can help, is that'll be the first, by the way, in a global South country. So putting the spotlight on some of the challenges that the global South faces on AI capacity, whether it's compute, data, talent, the open shared use cases, themes that the Secretary General's forthcoming report on AI capacity building has picked up. It is making suggestions for a global fund on AI, for a funders coordination platform, and for a network of capacity building centers. So we hope that the summit in India can take forward that issue. It's very important for the global South. So we put a floor under the AI divide. And the other hope is that the summit brings together different geographies, different national approaches, so that we have less of a fragmented approach, less of a competitive approach to AI, and more of a collaborative approach. It's simply too powerful a technology to be handled only within national borders, both in terms of its risks and the opportunities.
You mentioned things like the capacity building initiative, the fund. Um, what are some of the other ways we can ensure that developing countries in this new era of AI technology do not once again become just technology consumers, and are not just points of extractive practices around data, labor, environmental resources?
Yeah, no, that's a very important lesson also from the past. The only way to ensure that you're not passive consumers, but you are active participants in the AI economy is to develop local capacity for AI research and development, AI deployment, AI governance. So the SG's report lays this out very clearly. There is tiered distribution that the report showcases, tier 0 to tier 4, countries at different levels of AI maturity. And there are minimum capacities you need at each tier. So they have been clearly identified, and the funding needs for tier 0, tier 1 which is the most critical from our perspective at the UN, the 80 to 100 countries that have literally nothing today on AI. So focus on that through this global fund. In fact, we need a kind of a minimum bootstrap of about 3 billion rapid deployment across these 80 to 100 countries so that they can build up that minimum compute. I'm talking of 2-digit GPUs here. I'm not talking of hundreds of thousands, so a minimum data storage capacity, even if it's in single digit megawatts, where you can start curating your own data sets, some talent. So moving from a kind of a developer in the sense of coding, traditional coding capacity, to more of an AI developer capacity. So that minimum talent, some use cases around agriculture, health, etc., so that the cross domain talent also starts to get built. So those are the kind of fundamental issues that we need to kind of rapidly build out with this funding support, in-kind contributions, coordinated action, so that we are not again left with that situation of the majority of the world just being a bystander or passive consumers of AI developed elsewhere.
As we close out the conversation today, there's a lot of geopolitics at play in the context of AI. And there's a concern that it'll be in the bid for driving innovation. There will be a rapid fall in AI safety standards, and really, we'll see a lot of harm emerging. And it's in this context that, we've had in the recent World AI conference in Shanghai, China announcing an action plan for global AI governance, suggesting creation of a global AI cooperation organization. In the last couple of years, there was a lot of work that happened in the EU around framing of an AI Act, and there's work ongoing to enable its implementation. While there is a push within the EU, concurrently to perhaps walk back some of the stringency of the implementation, the US has recently unveiled its AI action plan as a roadmap around its approach to AI. In this context, how do we ensure that it's not the rapid bid for innovation that drives all thinking within national contexts, and we ensure that we remain committed to, key principles that have evolved over the last, several decades, and our commitment to human rights that's spearheaded by the United Nations.
Right. So this is a real concern that the world fragments on AI governance, and this turns into another arena of a battle for supremacy. And I think the antidote to that is more multilateral cooperation, more cooperative action. And that's what the GDC set out to do. And that's what these forthcoming mechanisms, the scientific panel, the governance dialogue, and this approach to AI capacity building set out to do. I think we have to bend the arc of investments and attention away from competition to these kind of collaborative approaches where we can handle risk together, harness the opportunity together, and also use frameworks like the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, which are shared global challenges, to kind of, channel more AI development into those areas. I think these are not just fond hopes, but we have a practical agenda for reinforcing what we call digital cooperation. And we live this day to day. So, yeah, in my visits to different countries, this is the point we make with all the influential actors, whether they are from the government or the private sector. This is our job at the United Nations. And it's not just advocacy for a forum, but this forum, as as we were mentioning, discussing at the beginning of the podcast, is something that the international community, the world, created after a horrendous world war, millions of people died. Most of the world was left in ruins, and it had to be rebuilt. It had to be rebuilt on hope and some aspirations around human dignity, human rights, human agency, peace, and security. There was also the challenge of decolonization at that time, and the UN led on that and made sure that freedom and self determination spread around the world. So, those are kind of achievements that often we ignore these days. But we are moving into a new age in which technology will pose new challenges. I don't wish the world to kind of go through similar scary experiences like we did with the Cuban Missile Crisis or some other scary moments during the Cold War. If we can avoid such scary moments and of our own volition, with some anticipation, uh, reinforce cooperation, that'd be good.
Thank you for your time today, sir. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you so much.
We would love to hear your thoughts on the episode and your suggestions on what topics you would like us to cover. You can reach out to us through email or find us on our social media. We will link the details of these in the show notes. Lastly, we would like to thank National Law University Delhi for their support in creating the podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation, please like and subscribe wherever you're listening to the podcast. We look forward to bringing you more content. This podcast is created by Center for Communication Governance at National Law University Delhi. This episode was edited by Gopika.